Hello everyone, welcome back to Pominoz. Hope we're all doing really well. If you are new around here, please smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. We're really KOing subscribers at the moment, which is absolutely grouse. You can go a step further and become a member of the channel. It's a real wonderful community. We sponsor a few players, one in the community called Shangor, and obviously the legend that is Domagu. If that's something that interests you, no obligation, get in there. But if you are a returning Pominozer, good day to you. How are you going? And obviously today we've got a two-part. We will be covering the lynch and reroll effect and also the ruck effect and how we can maybe look at alleviating that. But let's do the standard preview of this game, Carlton versus Richmond. Obviously, last time out, Carlton got the dub. A tremendous fourth quarter, getting us over the line where we really shifted gears. And it was really the first time we saw Vossi's Carlton in the blood and thick of battle, wasn't it? And it was a really, to be fair, when you actually go back and look at it, what we're seeing now is that kind of more refined. At the time, that was nearly Vossi's full strength side. It definitely had McGovern, that strong interceptor that obviously has been a poignant part of Vossi's game. Remember, we are ranking second in that transition, number one in transition differential over the last 6 weeks, which is huge. And I want to cover that a little bit with the transition because this is one of the greatest exponents of transition in Richmond. They score a large majority of their scores from turnover and in their ability to transition the football. And I think one of the forgotten tales of this, and as someone, as you guys and girls know, loves his stats paint a story. You've got to work out what the plot is. And Carlton genuinely went massively downhill after the first two games, and they were tracking okay on points for transition. It was after that they started to play sides that genuinely don't attack. Now, for you to have scores from defensive transition, the opposition has to attack. And genuinely has to attack in large parts. And if you watch when two good juggernauts go head-to-head, it's like an archaic 1980s heavyweight title fight. They get in the ring and they swing punches, so you are going to have plenty of chance for opposition. You've got to remember that also to take into account, Carlton have a high ball retention rate. So Carlton are the number one disposal side in the competition. There's a reason behind that. They control the football for large, sustained periods of the game, which obviously if you've got the ball, it's hard to score from turnover, isn't it, if you're controlling the ball, because you're going to have to give it up to get it back. So you've started to see Carlton in the last 6 weeks. They're playing better opposition, but they're also, it's getting to that stage of the season now where new sides are cemented. You're no longer a surprise. Rada. And Carlton have really done that. But the backstory for Carlton is obviously they're 9-3. Coming off a decent, very composed victory against Essendon. Going into this in the short turnaround, obviously, knowing that they've beaten this side and beaten them well. Not much separates these sides as well. Carlton going into it, obviously, you know, the number one clearance side in the competition. Do you know what I mean? The number one disposal, number one mark side. We love a handball chain, which is becoming a large staple of the Vossi's game plan. In styles make fights, Carlton, even with their outs, are probably a better drilled side now than round one. And that's the one way that they'll think of it. And hearing Vossi's press conference only about 10 minutes ago, he seems very confident. But what about Richmond? Richmond obviously started the year and people were questioning them. And they've started to really come in to their own recently. Decent win last time out at the G against Power. It wasn't convincing, but, you know, they got the job done. And that's what champions do. 7-5, just outside the 8. And it's been fairly decent, their form coming into this, apart from that one blip the other week. But they are the second highest scoring side in the competition. But one area here is really of key note for Carlton. The things that you notice about Richmond are their goal assists, their pressure, their score from transition. Top 5 for goal assists. They really do give it out really well. But their ability to play dual ruckman this year has been a real highlight probably for them. Nankervis, you know, doubling up with whoever they play, whether that's Bolter, whether that's Solder. They have really found a way of getting that. And they are the hardest side to hit out against in the comp. And also the hardest side to tackle, which are a staple of Vossi's game, the tackling particularly. And the hit outs are an area where you saw last week Essendon managed to get the jump on Carlton for the first time really in forever. Carlton kicked 0 goals from centre clearance, and it is a staple. Now, Carlton did add a layer last week with a large proportion of theirs, nearly 70% of scores coming from other areas around from the stoppage and things like that, so transition and defence. And one thing Carlton will look at is Richmond are the number one side to make mistakes against. The teams genuinely have the highest rate of clangers versus Richmond, and that comes from their pressure. And this is a really exciting factor here, I think, going into this game, because our strengths are their weaknesses, but their strengths are our weaknesses. So this is going to be a really, really exciting game. And already looking at this, whichever side, this can be lost at the selection table. Whichever side goes with defensive selections to alleviate the threat. So in their case, they'll be alleviating the threat of that they're one of the worst marking sides in the competition. They'll be looking to alleviate the threat of Curnow and Mackay. Without a shadow of a doubt, that's what they'll be doing. But they also, for all their pressure, etc., this year they've ranked bottom 2 for tackles per game. It's mainly pressure acts that you're seeing from them. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do that. Do they bring in an extra pressure player to put the pressure on Carlton in the middle of the park? Or do they look to go and try and really protect that back line? Because really this game is already saying the sauce wins it. Whoever wins the sauce. So this is going to be a really exciting game. Carlton obviously going to have to improve on last week's midfield outing, and we'll cover that in the second part. Selection then. That being said, with their selections, I don't think there'll be many forced changes for Richmond, if any at all, unless it's forced. So, I mean, obviously, I expect them to go in pretty unchanged as they did last week. I can't really, for the life of me, see too many changes unless they're forced. There may be an argument that Dustin Martin is a bit under the weather, so how true that is, who knows? But I can't see them going in, and don't quote me on this. I'd say unless Martin is pretty much on death's door, I can't really see him not playing this week unless it's bad. But then again, I think that they'll look at something like for like. Do you know what I mean? I don't think, well, as close to like for like as you can. I think it'll be a midfielder that can slot across the half-forward line. Now, Carlton's one is probably more interesting. We've announced that Durden's coming in. I can see Durden coming in. I've got a sneaky feeling that Cottrell will play. And I've got a sneaky feeling as well that Setterfield will be the Cherra replacement. And I don't think Cottrell will be the replacement for someone we think. Where maybe he was a bit quiet last week. But maybe Carlton, look, a good way to exploit Richmond is out wide. So maybe they look at Cottrell maybe for a Jack Martin or something like that. I don't know. But I've just got a feeling there's 3 changes this game. There's no inside mail. I'm not speculating. I've just got a feeling. And to be honest, though, my 2 changes, if I was just doing 2 changes, it would be Setterfield in. I've been talking about Hayes a lot. I've thought about it, though, and I think just around the centre of the ground is very key. He's very key, and Setterfield did pretty much play 80% of Cherra's role in VFL. So for me, that's the logical selection. Keys to winning then for Carlton is getting that centre ground clearance. It battered Richmond in the 4th last year. At the start of the year, and that is something Carlton are going to have to do. Now, obviously, Carlton, it's changed for them. Piternet's not there, and that is going to be probably the issue. We had the chance of rotating 2 tolls. Now, this week, we've got something interesting. Durden genuinely takes the back half stoppages, which is very important because that's a lot of work that TDK has to do, and we saw last week Harry taking the forward stoppages. I think now there is a chance that you can rest TDK a lot more. Now, what TDK for me has got to do this game is I want to see him stand his ground a bit more. I thought last week he got really into kind of a wrestling battle with how Draper and how Phillips play. Nankervis, as we know, is a very, very accomplished ruckman, but he isn't very agile. So this is where he's got to. If he loses that tap, stay and support his midfield. I like the fact that Setterfield comes in because we do know that he does prefer to stay there. He is a very static-based midfielder, particularly in the centre stoppages historically. And that's why I think that Carlton are going to have to do that. The other key for Carlton here as well is to really check that run of LyndenH. LyndenH, we know, runs in deep. We expect him to play. We expect him to be one of the changes. And that is what I think will be happen. I do think that if Martin is out, it will be a LyndenH Martin, and they'll be happy with it. And what LyndenH does genuinely is he comes from very deep. And what you see there is that the midfield, particularly players who are taller there in the midfield, Shai Bolton is one of the ones who does it. He runs from deep and Riewoldt and him intersect, which then gives him the space. That is going to be a key there for Carlton. That can they find a way to get Lewis Young a bit freer, because I think that's where it's going to come from, to be honest. We know his spoil numbers are insane, and that was a big part of his game last week that I was really impressed with. That is how Carlton can hurt this side in transition, because that's how Richmond look to get the ball inside 50. If you take away the midfield, they start going along, and they have a very, very, very one-dimensional way of doing it. And if Carlton can get them to that stage, that is happy days. Obviously, like we say, the midfield battle around the ground is. And Carlton as well, the key to winning is really being committed to them handball chains. We do see Carlton a lot go very retentive and forget, Ross has mentioned this a few times, they forget about playing their way. And when that happens, all sorts of things happen for Carlton, such as they start separating their lines and start looking to kick a bit more, a bit too much, a bit more distance, trying to force it, and you are playing into Richmond's hands. Richmond, really, their blueprint is simple. Really batter TDK, gain that ascendancy from Carlton, take it away, and then back your forward half pressure, which they're very exemplary at stopping Carlton's transition. That is the way that Carlton really don't want to be in that field, because Carlton are going to have to be aggressive in their ball movement, particularly in the back half of the ground. You have to be, because if you dilly-dally, that pressure is way too much. Richmond are a very well-drilled side. And even though they're ninth, it's still very fearsome because, like we say, they force mistakes because of their ability to do that. So for Carlton, they've got to really watch that. And that's something that Richmond will want. They can gain ascendancy in the middle, make it hard, make the midfield, because you've got to work overtime if you lose the hit-outs, because you are wrestling the ball back. That is going to slow the midfield out, and they can win that there by a death by 1,000 cuts. But Nankervis and how they double up in the ruck is very key for Richmond. And for Carlton there as well, for Richmond, they're going to be really trying to push the pillars. They have a lot of switches. They look to give and go a lot. They're going to be really working Carlton's forward line out. And the more they can tire them out, as we've seen against Essendon, that's a very key for our forwards work incredibly industriously. They can get a lot of foot minutes in the first half to our forward line. Gaps will naturally open up as they tire. So for Richmond, really, they're going to be backing their ball movement in. They're going to be really backing it in. We know that they're playing a lot more direct style this year as they've got older. So that's where Carlton are going to do it. They want to take the short option in that forward line, and Richmond will be looking for that short option. All in all, then, it's going to be an absolute great game. And what will happen, I think if LyndenH and Riewoldt get off the hook, Carlton are in trouble. Carlton are in trouble. I don't think, though, that it's as bad an out as people are making out, Marchbank. I do back Durden in. I think the role Durden would have to play on Riewoldt. It's quite simple. It's quite instantaneous. It's not difficult. I've got no trouble with him. And that is going to give him opportunities. We saw in the VFL against James Stewart, yes, he had 3 goals kicked on him. Technically, it was 2 as well, if you go back and watch the footage. But it was genuinely, he was trying to do the right thing and get ahead. I don't mind him doing that because obviously the ball comes a lot quicker in AFL. And at times, he just looked like he was too quick for the ball. He did the right call. The ball just, and it was a horrible windy day. People are forgetting that. That ball there was travelling 80 metres from kick-ins. Man, that's unheard of. So, for me, that is a big area. If Carlton can really cement that, and we've got LyndenH on Young, and Durden on Riewoldt, and then them smalls really actively work, that'll be okay. But if Carlton start to lose that midfield, it becomes easy ball in. And remember, 5th goal assists in the comp. They start finding ways to pick it apart, and that is through the dummy runs of them two, which we'll cover in a later video, Carlton are in bother. As for Richmond, Carlton fit will be very, 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 very squeaky bum time for Richmond, this proposition, because Carlton's brand is very, very complementary to play against Richmond. Our strengths are their weaknesses, like we've said. So if Carlton start to gain that ascendancy in the midfield, which I think they can do with the way our on-ball 5 work, they're in bother. They're in bother because if Carlton start getting that clearance game going, that then really causes them to do what they did in the fourth and make defensive switches which make their transition almost nigh impossible. And when Carlton start moving the ball quick, there is an issue for Richmond because that is what they did in the fourth. And Carlton know that. And that is something that I think Vossi has alluded to. They start to change their tempo way too much at certain stages in the game. And if Carlton keep their tempo and really control it, Richmond will struggle. This game for me is a flip of the coin. It's a tough game because, like I've said, there's a lot of little inner plots. Should be a great game, though. I'm expecting a ripper on tomorrow night. Stay tuned for the teams tonight. Stay tuned as well for the next part of this video. But thank you as always for watching. Have a safe week. Palm out.